All right. We're going to go to the first session now that I'm going to please to run for you, which is a TypeScript SDK. As you may know, and especially when we do orchestration, one task that is pretty good in the sense that it helps you to do whatever you want is, we call it simple task, but it's called mainly workers. And so the workers, when you define a worker task in your orchestration, it requires to run on an external program. The workers are set up outside of Conductor itself, so it can be distributed anywhere. It can be in your cloud, it can be on-prem. The demo I'm going to do for you will be on my local machine, and the orchestration will be in the cloud. So this will can work as well. Why? Because the worker polls the Conductor server for any scheduled work that the Conductor server will have for the worker. Conductor will pass the input to the worker for the execution and collect the output back to the Conductor server. And for that, we have, of course, SDKs for all the famous and used language these days. JavaScript, TypeScript is the same SDK, but we have also Java, we have Go, we have Python, we have .NET, and even Clojure. So for people who likes to develop with Clojure. So we're going to do a focus now on the JavaScript TypeScript one. How do I create a worker or I do an application that to execute an orchestration using the JavaScript TypeScript? It's very simple. Really, on like a few minutes, you can be up and running. Sorry. First, you need your project initialization. So you're going to create a new directory. You're going to npm init in order to have your package.json, and you're going to install your dependencies for TypeScript, for Node to run the app, and of course, the dependency for the Conductor JavaScript that will be that can be done by doing an npm if you use npm i -d for developer and Orkes at /conductor-javascript. Then you create your main file, and the last step before starting to code is to add some script in your package.json. The one to build the app will be a TSC, or TypeScript compiler, your index.ts, and to start the app by doing the node index.js. When you did that, you're ready to start coding. So what you're going to do to code first will be to import the right classes from the SDK and define the settings, because before your worker can work, you need to have a connection between your worker or your client app and the Conductor server. And this connection needs to be secured. That's very important. The way to secure an application is to define into Conductor some settings for the key ID and key secrets that will be also defined in your code by a constant. It's just an object with key ID, key secret, and your server URL. So you do the import of an Orkes Conductor client object and a task manager, and then you define your server settings. The next step will be to define your client object as a promise. So you're going to do that from the Orkes Conductor client class with the server settings. And then the next step will be to create your task manager. Task manager will call the task with some poll intervals, and will define also the level of concurrency you want, depending on the way you're going to deploy your worker. If you deploy it for a large scale, those options can be different, of course. So what you have to do here in your task manager, you resume your client premise in an object, and then you return a new task manager that will be with for which task definition you're going to do. Optionally, a domain. A domain will make sure that when a workflow is executed with a domain, a specific domain for your task, only this worker will be executed. So you can have different workers deployed everywhere and for the same task, but for different domains. That can be super helpful. And the execution of that worker will be with an execute method that will get some input data that will be sent by the Conductor server. And here you can do whatever you want. So for the sake of the demo, here what I do is I create a message value, hello world, and I return as an output data this message. And I give the status of my task. So I can have a worker that is like pretty quick. I just do something, I get the result, I put the result in my output data, and I give a status completed if everything went well. But sometimes it can be a little bit more longer. I don't know exactly when my worker will finish. So what I can do is to give first a status as a running, and then I can define also, I can complete my work and update the task to say to the task it is completed. And in case of failure, if, for example, my worker is doing something internally to my internal infrastructure and there is a problem, I can give the status that it is failed. So that's pretty much it. It's always the same kind of thing you have to do, and your custom code will be inside the execute method. Then you create your main function, and from that main function, you just invoke the task manager and start polling. And of course, in my index.ts, I launched the main function, so the polling starts. So let's switch to do a quick example to see that live. So I have here my project of a demo worker. I have my package.json. You see, I have all my developer dependencies, including the TypeScript SDK. I have my index.ts, where I define my server settings. I have my task manager, and I define my task and the domain, ABC 1122. And I can say here, the message is hello world. I output the data. I say it's completed. I start the polling. That's it. So when I go to my terminal, and I'm gonna just npm start, it starts polling, and now it's waiting for some work. So let's go to Conductor right now, and let's run a workflow. So I'm going to look at the definition first. So I have a demo workflow. The demo workflow has a task called my task that is relied to a worker that will be executed when my task will be executed by the orchestrator. I have a question, so I'm going to just pause now. And the questions from Michael is there any guidance on how to set the concurrency and polling options of the worker? So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer to you because the problem is it absolutely depends what kind of worker you want to build. Basically, if it is something that is very straightforward, does some execution and terminate, it depends also the number of time that this task will be executed, the number of workflows that will have this task, because a task can be reused in multiple workflows. So really, it depends, and giving you guidances would be very tricky because it can. I mean, we can tell you um, um, put the interval at that amount. If you know by advance that this is not a task that used to be run pretty often, you can define the interval that is more than 10 milliseconds. So at least you won't have an activity that will be there for nothing. You can say, yeah, let's once per hour, if it is to send a notification to an external system, for example, this is something you can say, I want to do it like every hour. If it is something that is, yeah, pretty often called, maybe you're going to keep to the 10 milliseconds, and maybe you're going to increase the concurrency because you may have multiple workflow instances at the same time, or requesting the execution of that task. So to not have some wait, this is the way you're gonna really balance your configuration here. Thanks for asking, Michael. So let me go back here. So I have my task here, and that's it here. The only thing I have to do is to run this workflow. I'm not going to put any parameter here. What I want is to make sure that the task is executed, but I need to define my mapping. Otherwise, my worker won't be executed. So I'm going to say my task has a domain called ABC1122. And I'm going to run the workflow. And I'm going to refresh because I know that this task has been executed, and I can see the domain has been set here, ABC1122. And I can introspect the workflow input output. And I can see that in the output, this is effectively what has been executed in my worker, which is here. Task has been executed successfully, and I have a task ID as well for this execution. That can be important if you want to introspect. I may also tell you that if you don't know that we have access to the timeline, so you can see how long was the running of this task, 58 milliseconds for my worker here. Again, in the infrastructure for the demo, my worker is in the cloud, and my Conductor server is in the cloud, and my worker is on my local machine. All right, let me go back to my slides for a moment, because we saw here how to run a worker, but you may want also to start a workflow from your code. Let's say you have a front-end application, and from your front-end application, you want to trigger a workflow. How to do that using the TypeScript SDK. This is even more easier than creating a worker here. You still have to do the import of this time a workflow executor, still the Orkes conductor client, because you need that connection with the conductor server. And to start the workflow, you're gonna create your promise as usual. You're gonna create a new workflow executor with that client. So connection is made securely. And then you can start a workflow. You're gonna give a name to the workflow, and you can precise as well the version you want to for which you want to run the workflow. You know that a workflow can have multiple versions, so sometimes it can be interesting to have an application that's still on a version while you're working on a new version of your workflow. If it is like a pricing calculation or something like that, and the pricing will start only at a certain date, this is something you can do by making sure that you work on it, you can do your test, but at the same time, your application is still working on the previous version. you can send input and you can also precise the task to domain when you do this execution. So everything that you show that I did on the client console by the user interface, I can do it by code here using the workflow executor and the start workflow method. And here what I'm going to do is just to alert the execution ID. Execution ID is very important. Execution ID will give you the ID of your workflow instance that is running. Again, let's see that as an example. So for that, I'm going to go back to my code, but I'm going to switch to another application that is a Vue.js application, just like the pretty standard one where I have a component called sample view. This one says send a message to start the workflow, and I have my I have an input text, and I have a button that on click call a send message function. My send message function is creating my client object to Conductor, will execute the workflow here and start the workflow. As you can see, by using in my code editor, by using the SDK, I have access to all the code compilation and all the information about what are the capabilities of the SDK. I can start, terminate, update tasks, everything that you can do by the API is available from the SDK. Same for if you want if you don't know what kind of value you can put. Let me just go back one moment on the demo worker here, because we saw we can put completed. But let's say you don't know exactly what to put here. Just by doing this, you can say, I can do complete, in progress, I can do fail with terminal error. So you're very an assistance here when you're going to code. That is pretty interesting. All right, so let's go back to the terminal. I'm going to switch to another terminal window. And what I'm going to do here is to run my demo app. It's running on localhost 5173. That should be, let's just refresh to make sure. Yeah, so it's the pretty much usual Vue.js basic application. And I just added a sample window here, and I'm going to send my message. Hello, folks. And I'm going to start the workflow. I'm going to click on send. I have a workflow ID. I'm going to do copy of that. I'm going to go back to my Orkes console. I'm going to go to execution, and I'm going to search by workflow ID. Yeah, I have it. And I can see it has executed also my task. So I have both on my local, the worker running and my sample app running. If I go to the workflow input output, I can see that as an input, I received hello folks, and as the output, I got hello world in the message that was returned by my worker.